Okay, we're going to begin on Chapter 12, which is in legal research, that is titled E-Research, Legal Research Using the Internet. So in Chapter 11, we did digital libraries, and that is where you're going to do the bulk of your legal research. You're not always going to have a digital library available to you. So your textbook gives you the opportunity to do some research just using different websites that are available to you broadly on the internet. Now, why would we want to do this? I'll be very honest with you. There's not a whole lot of reasons legally if you're writing legal motions or appellate briefs or that kind of thing. When you're doing a filing with the court, stick to the legal digital libraries. But that's not the only thing that we do. We sometimes want to know who the opposing counsel is that we're going against. We sometimes want to investigate maybe a defendant or a plaintiff. Or if we're in the criminal arena, maybe a criminal defendant. Maybe we want to look at their social media posts. Maybe we want to see where opposing counsel went to law school or whether they speak on certain topics. Sometimes we have to be investigators. And using the internet more broadly for those kinds of topics is useful. And just knowing what's available to you is what this chapter is about. Now, we're going to get into drafting documents like professional letters, legal memoranda, and appellate briefs. When it comes to using the internet and the resources available, the only time we're really going to use that is when we are doing our letters. Making sure we have background, making sure we know what we're talking, who we're talking to, so that we can set the right tone for a letter. And so a lot of this information is helpful outside of things we're going to file with the court. So when we're talking about just using the internet, in the introduction to this chapter, we use it for just basic communication, right? We email people back and forth, and that is, again, a tool that you know how to you have to learn how to use properly. Emails are not confidential. What do I mean by that? Well, any 12-year-old in the mom's basement can usually hack into your email account. Especially if you're using an email service that's free, where, Gmail, where they sell information about you to advertisers the minute you keystroke, right? Have you ever done a search on looking for something and then immediately there's an ad that pops up? It's the same kind of idea. Now that presents a problem when we're talking about our clients, because we have attorney-client privilege. That means that when an attorney talks to the client, anything that happens in that private conversation, nobody else is allowed to know about, right? In my world, we used to call my office Vegas, because whatever happens in Vegas stays in Vegas, right? Probably if you're of a certain age, you know that commercial. That used to be a Vegas commercial, right? What happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. My office was Vegas. Nobody knew who walked in. Nobody knew what they came to talk to me about, if they were seen walking in my office. My husband used to tease me because we would go to the grocery store, and in our little town, I did the divorces of everybody in our little town. And people would come up to me and say, oh, the kids are doing great or whatever. And my husband would say, who's that? And I'd say, oh, just somebody I knew. And after a while, he sort of caught on. He was like, oh, that was a client. But I can't tell anybody who my client is. That's privileged. Now, my client could tell somebody, hey, I went to go see Diane Edson. A client can waive the privilege. A client can say, I don't really care if you know about this. Okay? But the lawyer can't. The client owns the privilege, not the attorney. So telling you all of that, what's the deal with emails? Well, they're not privileged because anybody can hack into them. They should be privileged, let me put it this way. But in reality, they're not because anybody can hack into them. There are email services that you pay for that put up firewalls, don't sell to advertisers, and most lawyers will employ those email services. The problem is, if I send an email from my very secure email provider to your AOL account, what's going to happen? Well, they can't hack in on my end, but they can hack in on the other one's end. And even if there's no hacking, I did a good bit of my career doing divorce law. A lot of people who are getting divorced are kind of secretive about it and are still living with their husband or wife before the divorce is filed. So maybe your spouse can key into your email and see your communications with your attorney. Right? The same kind of goes for text messages. Same idea. Okay? So what do we do about emails? You want to make sure that two things are true. Or three things actually. That you have a secure server. That you make sure that you've done everything in your power to make sure that that email stays confidential. The second thing is that the client signs a permission allowing you to email them and basically absolving you of responsibility if something goes awry. If somebody taps into it or somebody opens your emails, it's not your fault. So you absolutely have to have your client to do that. Otherwise, you're on the hook because these things are not secure. Okay? And the last thing you want to do is when you send an email, much like when you send a fax, which some people still send faxes, you need to have something on there that says if you're receiving this email by mistake, or if you are not the intended recipient, you have no right to see this. Now, what does that do? Well, that puts them on notice. Does it really do anything? No, really doesn't. But to protect yourself and your office, you do that. Now, you may be saying, well, I'm not the lawyer. What do I care? Anything that you do binds the lawyer. You are the agent of the attorney. Anything you do, the attorney ratifies and the attorney's on the hook. And if the attorney's on the hook for something bad that you did, guess what? You're not going to have a job. So really not the best plan to have the I don't care attitude. Okay? So that has to do with communication. Court filings. What else do we use the internet for? You can actually go online with most courts these days. Not all of them have caught up to making sure that everything that gets filed gets posted on whatever the clerk of court's website is. But you can easily, in all federal courts, including bankruptcy courts, go online and see what's been filed. It's all posted. So if you want to know whether there's been good service of process, if I filed a lawsuit and I'm waiting for certified mail cards to come back, or I'm waiting for the process server to file an affidavit saying, yep, service is complete, now the case can take off, you can easily go on and check that. And that's actually quite useful. instead of sending a law clerk down to the courthouse to double check whether or not you have service on something, now with a keystroke you can check it very quickly and easily, and inexpensively, because you don't have to pay a law clerk. Okay? Marketing is another thing that we use the internet for. How do you look up what attorney to use? The internet, of course. There aren't phone books anymore. So what do? You Google personal injury lawyers, bankruptcy lawyers, criminal defense lawyers, domestic relations lawyers. You Google it. And Google will say, can we see where you live so we can tell you who lives close to you or who practices close to you? And then you get a list. So lawyers have websites. Law firms, independent lawyers, everybody's got a website. Lawyers also subscribe to different firms that promote certain lawyers, right? If you are a personal injury lawyer, there are groups out there that will put together one website and then will refer cases out to different plaintiffs' lawyers. And it's a subscription program where the lawyers pay this marketing company and then they refer the cases out. Okay? So knowing how marketing works with the internet, another really important use of the internet. All lawyers have to take what are called continuing legal education hours. I think you have to have 12 hours a year. Okay? In the old days, we would go to lunch and we would get an hour's worth of continuing legal education. You can still do that. The Bar Association puts those on. Or we would go to a conference. Or if we really wanted to, we would go to a conference in a very warm place in the middle of winter and write the whole thing off. Or you can go on the internet. And you can watch a video, answer some questions, and boom, you have your continuing legal education hours. A lot less expensive, and it helps because time is important. You know, lawyers' time is how they make money. If I'm at a seminar, I can't be making money. So if at 10 o'clock at night or 11 o'clock at night, I can log on, watch a video for 45 minutes, answer some questions, and get an hour's worth of continuing legal education hours, I'm in. So again, another use of the internet for attorneys. Commerce. If I'm buying Westlaw, if I'm buying books, whatever, I'm going to buy them online. Where else am I going to get them from? And research, which we just spent the last chapter on. Okay, so these are all uses for using the internet in a legal setting. Now, your book goes through a glossary of terms, and most of these you're going to know. But, you know, cloud computing, domain name, downloading. Why is this such a big deal for us to put into a legal research class? Well, because if you are looking something up and it has a domain name or it's stored in an iCloud account or a Google Cloud account, you better know what that stuff means. Now, for someone my age, this was stuff we had to learn. For people your age, it's kind of just part of your vocabulary. Okay? There were a couple things in here. Hyperlink. We use hyperlinks in Westlaw, where you can instantaneously go from a case to all the other cases with Keysight. So hyperlink is something you'll use just in your everyday practice. The other thing, another thing that's in this list is an intranet. Intra, different prefix than internet. So an intranet, if I work in a law firm, can have an internal email system. I can have an internal system where I put my billable hours in that maybe my supervisor can see, and also my secretary can see, because my secretary has to put together all of my billables for the end of the month. And so that person has access to what I have. Okay? It's interesting because more and more large and even medium and small law firms are creating their own intranet. Again, as technology becomes more accessible for everybody to access, an intranet helps with that attorney-client privilege, right? If I'm sending an internal email, it's less likely to be hacked because it's on a more secure system. Think of an intranet almost like old-fashioned inter-office memos where people can talk to each other. Okay? Let me look here real quick. I don't think that there are any more that you would not recognize. I'm going to ask you in one of your assignments, though, to defend some of these. Okay? Or not defend, to define some of them. Okay? So when you're given a research assignment, sometimes you might want to just start with the internet and not spend time on Westlaw. Here's the reason why. Westlaw costs money. Every time you go on it, it costs some money. The internet, at least, for a lot of the sites that you might begin some research on, are free. Now, you're not going to find everything you want, but it gives you a starting point. Okay? And your book cautions you that you have to be kind of careful with the World Wide Web. It's, again, not something that most people don't know. But if you're going to rely upon something in a website, always check the domain name. Make sure that, if you're talking about an article that's been posted, or you're taking information from an article that's posted, see how old that article is. Sometimes you can just tell when you look at a website, you're like, this looks a little sketchy. Not really thinking this is good. Okay? Always check references. Always, always, always. Now your book says if you find something good, bookmark it. I'm assuming everybody knows how to bookmark. I see you do it on your phone. If you are looking and you see some gaps in information, fill in the gaps. If you think that there's a good newsletter out there, maybe there's a professional newsletter that is dedicated to the area of law that you're practicing in, subscribe to it. Get it sent to you all the time. If you're a member of the Ohio State Bar Association, they not only put out a newsletter, but they also publish or give members access to new decisions every week. Now, I know you can go on Westlaw and you can get what was decided this morning. That's going to cost you some money. It is going to cost you money to belong to the State Bar Association, but you are going to do that anyway, and these are the perks that come along with it. Okay? Practical concerns about the use of the internet. Again, make sure you don't go down a rabbit hole. Make sure that you don't go on the dark web. Make sure that you are responsible in what you're researching. It's really that simple. There are some good research sites that are listed in this particular chapter, and that's actually the reason why I wanted to go through this chapter. If you are looking for a starting point, Cornell.edu, Wash Law.edu, Find Law, and Justia. These are free access sites that give you links to cases. Again, not as quick and as clean as Westlaw, but it's a good starting point so that you're not wasting your client's money on Westlaw. What do I mean when I say that? Okay, every time I go on Westlaw, every search that I do costs money. When I log into Westlaw, I have to put my client's number in there or my client's name in there, and then I can pull how much time I've spent on Westlaw for that particular client, print it, and bill them for it. I'm not eating that cost. That cost is getting passed on to my client. So if I spend 12 hours on Westlaw and send my bill a client for $2,500 for legal research, my client's going to say, well, what'd you get for that time? Well, I figured out the law. Maybe I should have spent 15 hours on FindLaw or on cornell.edu and then gone to Westlaw, because that would have shortened my time period. I don't always do that, because the more you do legal research, the better you get at it. The more I have bookmarked cases that I use frequently, the less time I have to do researching. But as you're just getting started, these free internet resources are available to you. Plus, let's think about this. When you leave ETI and you don't have access to Westlaw, maybe you just want to look something up. These are really good websites for that. Okay? Other good websites for locating cases. The U.S. Supreme Court and the uscourts.gov list every case that's been decided. You can read those opinions for free. Always. Okay? The best one for looking at statutes are listed. FindLaw is good. Cornell is good. Uniform Laws is okay. I don't really think that one's that great. The best sites for government materials, USA.gov, Congress.gov, those are the good ones. And again, if I want to know what the regulations are for ponds from the U.S. Department or Environmental Protection Agency, I can go on these websites and I can find out. And they've actually updated their websites so that it's almost like Google again. It's almost like a plain English search on Westlaw, where you simply put in statutes, ponds, private property, and the regulations will come up. Okay? If you're looking for forms, now what do I mean by forms? Look, let's say I have to file a motion for something. I'm like, oh man, do I have to reinvent the wheel? How am I going to do this? What's the right wording for this? I can go on these websites and I can pull up forms that I can lift language from, so I'm not reinventing the wheel. So if you go on Justia or Washlaw or Lectlaw, all you really put in is legal forms, and then they'll give you a list of forms that you can choose from. Okay? If you're interested in paralegal associations, there are four actually that are listed here. And I would strongly urge you that if you are going to pursue working in a law office, you want to make sure that you belong to one of these associations, that you get publications either in the mail or online, that you get updates, because the world of paralegals is changing every day. Paralegals can do everything from scheduling hearings to putting together whole litigation teams to managing the IT in a large firm. So, there's tons to do, and this gives you access to different opportunities that are available to you. Okay? On page 499 and all the way through 501, there are some specialty sites. And again, these are depending on what area of law you're in. You may want to look at these. And again, lots of times when you go on these websites, they'll say, give us your email, tell us if you want us to send you information every month, and you will say, here it is, yes I do. Right? If I'm in intellectual property and that's what my office does, I want to know everything I can about intellectual property. So I'm going to go on these websites, I'm going to see what they have to offer, I'm going to give them my email, and I am going to get flooded with information. Sometimes you're going to open your email and say, oh my gosh, it's another thing from them. But you're going to read it and hopefully learn something new every single time. Okay? There are legal research and writing sites. Okay? And those are on the page of top of page 501. Georgetown has one. University of Chicago has one. And so a lot of these give you examples, give you forms, give you hints on how to make arguments. If you're doing court filings, these are actually really useful websites. Before ETI had access to Westlaw, I used to use these all the time in this class. So I encourage you, take a minute and look at those. Okay? Your book goes into citation forms. Make sure that whatever you pull off the internet, you're double checking your citation forms. Okay? And that's really it for this chapter. It's a short chapter, but I am going to give you some internet research to do, which is going to take a little bit of extra time. So give yourself a little bit of extra time. But it's important that you are able to use all of the resources that are available to you. It's important for you to be able to discern between when you should use free internet resources and when you should go on Westlaw. It's important for you to balance how much money can I charge my client for this. And it's also important for you to roll from a lot of these, especially professional websites, into associations, publications, things that will help you long term develop your skills in the legal profession. Okay? So I will put your assignments up and your discussion up for this chapter. As always, if you have any questions, please email me, tell me you need to meet in person, or if you'd rather Zoom in person so that we can answer any questions you might have. But I'm here to answer questions, so please do not be bashful. Okay, I'll post the rest of this right now.